What in the hell do you think you're doing? Just standing there like a statue. This is a life or death drill, lady, not a coffee break. The words, sharp and dripping with condescension, cut through the simulated chaos of the lobby. The crowd of huddled employees, playing their part as terrified civilians, snickered nervously. Dale Harding, the security manager, a man whose physical presence was a monument to his own self-importance, loomed over the small, unassuming woman. She was still a point of absolute calm in a sea of manufactured panic. Her simple gray blazer and dark slacks were a stark contrast to the tactical gear worn by Harding's team. He saw a box ticker, a diversity hire, a consultant who had no place in his world of sweat and consequence. He saw weakness. To emphasize his point, to make an example of her for his team, he shoved her hard. She stumbled but didn't fall, her balance correcting with an unnatural fluidity. That only enraged him more. He stepped closer, his face a mask of theatrical fury, and slapped her, the sound a sharp crack that momentarily silenced the noise of the drill. The crowd gasped. Harding felt a surge of dominance. But the woman, she didn't flinch. She didn't cry out. She didn't even raise a hand to her reddening cheek. She simply blinked once, her breathing unchanged, her dark eyes tracking his with an unnerving, analytical placidity. In the high-tech control room on the 50th floor, General Marcus Thorne, the company's CEO, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing at the monitor displaying the scene. He wasn't watching the drill anymore. He was watching the woman. He saw her stance after the shove, the way her weight was perfectly centered, a coiled spring of potential energy. He saw the way her head barely moved from the force of the slap, a sign of a conditioned response, so deep it was instinct. He saw the ghost of something he hadn't seen in 20 years, a posture he recognized from the dust-choked briefing tents of forgotten war zones. A quiet dread, mixed with a profound respect, began to bloom in his chest. Down in the lobby, Harding felt the woman's silence as an act of defiance, a personal insult to his authority. If you believe that true strength doesn't need to announce itself, type silence below. Harding leaned in, his voice a low, mocking growl meant for her, but loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. See? That's what happens when you freeze. In a real situation, you're dead. You're a liability. You get other people killed. Whatever report you were hired to write, you can put that in there. He gestured expansively with a thumb hooked in his tactical vest, a preening display for his subordinates who stood by, their expressions a mixture of amusement and unease. They were loyal to Harding, but the woman's utter lack of reaction was deeply unsettling. It wasn't the response of a frightened civilian. It wasn't even the response of a trained professional showing restraint. It was something else entirely, an absence of response, so complete it felt alien. Harding continued his tirade, his words a cascade of assumptions built on the foundation of his own prejudice. I've been in the service. I know the type. You're a pencil pusher, sent down from corporate to justify your salary by finding fault with real operators. You sit in an air-conditioned office reading theory while men like me bleed to keep people like you safe. He was painting a picture for his audience, casting himself as the grizzled warrior and her as the ignorant academic. The employees, caught in the social crossfire, avoided the woman's gaze, their complicit silence a heavy blanket in the marble-floored atrium. But through it all, she remained a vessel of profound stillness. Her eyes, which had been locked on his, now drifted away, scanning the lobby not with fear, but with a chilling, dispassionate geometry. She was assessing angles, measuring distances, noting the placement of Harding's men, the reflections in the polished chrome fixtures, the subtle shift in weight of the man playing the role of an active shooter near the main entrance. Her right hand, which had been hanging loosely at her side, twitched, a barely perceptible motion, as her fingers brushed against the simple, worn leather satchel slung over her shoulder. It was a movement of such practiced economy that no one noticed it, a prelude to a symphony no one in that room was prepared to hear. Her focus was absolute, her composure a shield that his insults could not penetrate. He was talking to a person, but she was analyzing a problem, and the problem, she was beginning to realize, was far more complex than a simple security drill. The silence she offered wasn't weakness. It was the sound of a weapon being calibrated. The scenario, meticulously designed by Harding himself, was meant to be a showcase of his team's efficiency. Two of his men, designated as assailants and armed with non-lethal training rifles, were scripted to breach the east entrance, fire simulated rounds to create panic, and then attempt to take a specific executive as a hostage before being heroically neutralized by the waiting response team. It was a dance, a piece of corporate security theater. But the woman, Anya Sharma, had been hired by Thorne precisely because he suspected the theater was a facade for deep, systemic flaws. And she had spotted one within minutes of arriving. The assailants, young, arrogant, and eager to impress Harding, had been given too much autonomy. They saw the drill not as a test of procedure, but as a competition against their colleagues. This institutional arrogance, Sharma knew, was a critical vulnerability. As Harding continued his verbal assault, the two assailants went off script. Instead of moving toward their designated hostage target, they saw an opportunity for a more dramatic outcome. They herded a group of panicked employees toward the main bank of elevators, a tight, enclosed space with glass walls, a classic fatal funnel. It was a tactically unsound move for them, but it created maximum visual chaos, which they mistook for success. Harding, finally turning his attention from Sharma, saw the deviation. A flicker of panic crossed his face. This wasn't in the script. Team Bravo, what are you doing? Your target is on the mezzanine. Fall back to the objective, he barked in his radio. But his men, caught up in their own adrenaline, ignored him. We have multiple hostages, sir. We're locking down the elevator bank. One of them yelled back, the lie intended to cover their improvisation. The drill was no longer a drill. It had degraded into a chaotic mess, exposing the brittleness of Harding's command. His authority, built on volume and posture, evaporated the moment the plan faltered. He shouted more orders, each one more frantic and contradictory than the last. The response team, confused by the conflicting commands, hesitated. The entire security apparatus seized up, paralyzed by the failure of its leader. And in the heart of that escalating chaos, Anya Sharma took one slow, deliberate breath. The time for observation was over. Her movement was not a reaction. It was an answer. It began not with her feet, but with her eyes. They swept the area one last time, locking in the final positions of every variable. Then she flowed. It wasn't a run or a sprint. It was a dissolution of stillness and emotion, a seamless transition from potential to kinetic energy that was both breathtakingly fast and unervingly smooth. She moved with the calculated grace of a predator, using the decorative marble pillars and panicked bodies of the employees as a shifting landscape of cover and concealment. The first assailant, his back to her as he covered the cornered employees, never saw her coming. Sharma didn't announce her presence. She simply arrived. Her left hand shot out, not in a strike, but as a brace against the wall beside him, a pivot point for the physics she was about to unleash. Her right hand moved in a blur, a precise surgical strike to the radial nerve on his wrist. The man's hand went numb, his fingers spasming open involuntarily. The training rifle clattered against the marble floor. Before it could settle, Sharma's foot had swept it aside as she continued her motion, her body corkscrewing. She didn't stop to admire her work. The first assailant was a domino, and she was already moving to the next. The second man, hearing the sound, began to turn, his rifle coming up. He was too slow. Sharma, using the first man's body as a momentary shield, closed the distance in a single, fluid step. Her hand, the one that had just disarmed his partner, slapped the side of his weapon's magazine well, not hard, but with a perfectly timed jolt that disrupted his aim. In the same instant, her other hand secured the barrel. It wasn't a contest of strength. It was a lesson in leverage. With a twist that used his own forward momentum against him, she torqued the rifle from his grasp and drove the butt of the weapon into his solar plexus. He doubled over, the air rushing from his lungs in a silent gasp. The entire engagement, from a moment she first moved to the moment the second rifle was secure in her hands, had taken less than 7 seconds. A profound, deafening silence descended upon the lobby. The simulated gunfire, the panicked screams, Harding's frantic radio calls. All of it was gone, replaced by the collective, held breath of 50 people. Harding stood frozen, his jaw slack, his face a canvas of pure, uncomprehending disbelief. The woman he had slapped, the consultant he had mocked, the liability he had publicly shamed, now stood over his two best men, holding their weapons, her posture once again one of absolute, lethal calm. "That's not possible," Harding whispered to no one, the words a hollow admission of a truth he could not yet process. The chime of the express elevator was unnaturally loud in the tomb-like silence of the lobby. Every head turned as the polished steel doors slid open with a soft hiss. General Marcus Thorne stepped out, his presence immediately commanding the space. He was flanked by his two executive assistants, but they seemed to fade into the background, mere satellites to the gravitational pull of his authority. Thorne was in his late 60s, tall and lean, wearing a bespoke suit that couldn't conceal the rigid military posture that had been ingrained in him over 4 decades of service. His face was a roadmap of command decisions made in harsh sunlight and under immense pressure. He didn't survey the chaotic scene of the failed drill. He didn't look at the stunned employees or the humbled security team. His gaze, sharp and penetrating as a raptor's, cut through the entire room and fixed solely on Anya Sharma. He walked toward her, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the marble. The path cleared before him, as if by an invisible force. Harding, who had been staring dumbly at Sharma, snapped to a semblance of attention, his face draining of all color as he recognized the approaching figure. This was not just the CEO. This was General Thorne, a living legend in the special operations community, a man whose reputation was forged in fire and secrecy. Thorne stopped a few feet from Sharma, his eyes taking in the scene in a single, comprehensive sweep. The two neutralized assailants on the floor, the two training rifles held expertly in Sharma's hands, the look of shattered arrogance on his security manager's face. He understood everything in an instant. The air grew thick, heavy with the weight of an impending judgment that everyone knew was coming. Thorne's expression was unreadable, carved from granite, but there was a flicker in his eyes, not of anger, but of something far more profound, recognition and a deep, somber respect. He had seen ghosts like her before, in places the world wasn't supposed to know existed, and he knew, with chilling certainty, the magnitude of the mistake his security manager had just made. General Thorne let the silence hang in the air for a long moment, a deliberate tool to amplify the weight of his words. He finally turned his gaze from Sharma and settled it upon Dale Harding. The security manager flinched as if struck. "Mr. Harding." Thorne's voice was not loud, but it possessed a quality of command that resonated in the bone. It was a voice accustomed to being obeyed without question, across continents and in the face of enemy fire. "You have been my head of corporate security for 3 years. In that time, you have repeatedly assured me of your team's readiness, of your own expertise in threat assessment. Tell me, Mr. Harding, in all your extensive experience, do you have any idea who you just assaulted?" The question was quiet, rhetorical, and utterly devastating. Harding could only stammer, "Sir. She's the consultant from..." Thorne cut him off with an almost imperceptible shake of his head. He gestured to his executive assistant, a young man who looked ashen-faced. The assistant stepped forward and held up a tablet, the screen facing Harding. On it was a personnel file, Spartan in its detail, but cataclysmic in its implications. The narrator's voice seemed to echo Thorne's thoughts, listing the credentials in a staccato rhythm of revealed truth. Name, Anya Sharma. Rank, Master Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy. Retired. Unit classification, Tier 1. Last command, Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Call sign Ghost. Combat deployments, 12, all classified. Awards and commendations, Navy Cross. The Silver Star with 2 oak leaf clusters. The Bronze Star with Valor Device. The Purple Heart. A list of citations followed, each one a testament to acts of heroism in the darkest corners of the globe. Harding's eyes widened in horror as he read, the color draining completely from his face. He looked from the tablet to the small, quiet woman in the gray blazer. He wasn't seeing a consultant. He was seeing a ghost, a legend from a world he had only ever pretended to understand. Thorne watched the realization dawn on Harding's face, then turned back to Sharma. He straightened his suit jacket, his posture shifting from that of a CEO to that of a general officer. He stood at perfect attention, his body a ramrod of military discipline. Then, in the silent, stunned lobby of his billion-dollar corporation, General Marcus Thorne rendered a salute. It was not a casual gesture. It was a formal, precise, and deeply reverent acknowledgement of superior service and sacrifice, a four-star general paying homage to a non-commissioned officer. Master Chief, he said, his voice now filled with an undisguised, profound respect. Welcome to Thorne Industries. I trust your assessment is proceeding as planned, and I apologize sincerely for the unprofessional reception you have received. The story of what happened in the lobby did not walk, it ran. It didn't spread through official channels or company memos. It moved like wildfire through the digital and verbal underground of the entire building. It started with the whispers of the employees who had witnessed it, their voices hushed with awe as they recounted the tale in the cafeteria and over instant messenger. They spoke of the slap, the impossible silence, and the 7 seconds of fluid, terrifying grace that followed. Then came the security team members, their own narratives colored by a mixture of shame and a newfound, grudging respect. They described it to their families, to their friends and other security firms, the legend growing with each retelling. The most potent accelerant, however, was the security footage. Within hours, a low-resolution clip from a lobby camera, leaked by an anonymous IT employee who felt Harding had gotten what he deserved, appeared on a private, encrypted forum for former special operations personnel and high-end security contractors. The video was simply titled, Harding's Bad Day. Meet Ghost. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Men who had served in every theater of war for the past 30 years recognized the economy of motion, the absolute situational awareness. They didn't see a consultant. They saw one of their own, a quiet professional of the highest caliber. Dale Harding became an overnight cautionary tale, a meme for institutional arrogance. The public humiliation was absolute. But General Thorne did not fire him. In his wisdom, Thorne understood that a lesson this profound was more valuable than any punishment. The following Monday, Harding was ordered to report not to the executive suite, but to a small, unassuming office on the 14th floor. He knocked, and the door was opened by Anya Sharma. There was no gloating in her eyes, no hint of victory. There was only the same calm, analytical focus he now understood to be the hallmark of her existence. Harding, a man who had built his career on projecting strength, stood before her, utterly humbled. "Ma'am," he said, his voice cracking slightly as he held up a pen and a notebook. General Thorne said, "He said my training was to begin today. I'm ready to learn." He was no longer a gatekeeper. He was a student, his entire worldview shattered, and now waiting to be rebuilt, piece by piece, on the bedrock of a respect he had been forced to learn. The physical space of the incident soon became imbued with its own mythology. The area by the elevator bank, once just a high-traffic part of the lobby, was now spoken of in reverent tones. The security team, and soon the other employees, began calling it Sharma's Corner. It was where the loud arrogance of Dale Harding had collided with the quiet competence of a Navy SEAL and had been utterly annihilated. General Thorne, recognizing the power of institutional memory and symbolism, decided to commemorate it. He didn't erect a gaudy statue or a detailed plaque recounting the event. That would have been contrary to everything Sharma represented. Instead, he had a small, discreet bronze plate affixed to the marble pillar she had used as a pivot point. The inscription was simple, etched in clean, serif font, Si vis pacem, para bellum below it, a single line, in honor of true professionals. If you want peace, prepare for war. It was a nod to the warrior ethos, a quiet acknowledgement understood only by those who knew the story. The plaque became a touchstone. New security recruits were taken there on their first day and told the story of what had happened, not to glorify violence, but as a lesson in humility, a warning against the dangers of assumption. When asked about the incident by Thorne in a later debrief, Sharma's response was characteristically devoid of ego. She didn't speak of the slap or of Harding's insults. She simply pointed to a blueprint of a lobby on a large monitor. "The sightlines here are compromised, General," she said, her finger tracing a red line. "The reflective surfaces create blind spots, and this entryway is a natural funnel. Tactically, it's a defensive liability." She then proceeded to deliver a 2-hour masterclass on architectural security design, never once mentioning her own actions. She deflected all praise, all attempts to mythologize her, and focused only on the mission, fixing the problem. Her legend grew not because of what she said about that day, but precisely because she refused to speak of it at all. Her silence on the matter was more powerful than any boast, a testament to a philosophy where deeds were the only currency that mattered. The corner wasn't named for a single act. It was named for the principle that the act represented. A year passed. The transformation within Thorne Industries was not just visible, it was palpable. The security team moved with a new sense of quiet purpose. The swagger was gone, replaced by focused, professional alertness. The protocols and procedures, completely redesigned by Anya Sharma from the ground up, became the new gold standard in the corporate world. Companies from across the globe sent their own security chiefs to study the Thorne model, a system built not on expensive technology or aggressive posturing, but on the core principles of humility, constant assessment, and the quiet competence Sharma embodied. Dale Harding was now her most fervent disciple. General Thorne had made him Sharma's direct deputy, a move that proved to be a stroke of genius. The daily experience of working for the woman he had so publicly misjudged forged him into a new man. The arrogance was burned away, leaving behind a core of genuine dedication. He was now the one who vetted new recruits, and his interviews were legendary. He didn't look for the biggest or the loudest candidates. He looked for the quiet ones. He looked for the listeners, the observers. He would often tell the story of Sharma's corner to new hires, using his own profound failure as the primary teaching tool. "I looked at Master Chief Sharma," he would say, his voice steady with the conviction of a convert, "and I saw what I wanted to see. I saw a small woman, a consultant. I let my ego and my assumptions write a story that wasn't true. I learned that day that the most dangerous person in any room is almost never the one making the most noise. It's the one who has nothing to prove." The story became institutional folklore, a foundational myth for the company's new culture. It was a living lesson, proving that a single act of undeniable competence could dismantle a culture of prejudice far more effectively than any mandate or seminar. Sharma's true legacy wasn't the 7 seconds of flawless action in the lobby. It was the thousands of hours of changed behavior that followed. She hadn't just disarmed 2 men with training rifles. She had disarmed an entire organization's ignorance. The true measure of a legacy is not found in a plaque on a wall or a story told in a hallway. It is found in the continuation of a principle, the quiet ripple of an idea that expands long after the initial event has faded into memory. Anya Sharma was rarely seen at the company's headquarters anymore. Her work was done. She had rebuilt the system, trained her successor, and like the ghost she was once called, had faded back into the quiet life she preferred. Yet, her presence was more deeply felt than ever before. It was in the calm, methodical way the new guards scanned their sectors. It was in the respectful nod they gave each other during shift changes. It was in the humility with which Dale Harding, now a respected security director in his own right, listened to the suggestions of even the most junior recruit. On a crisp autumn afternoon, General Thorne stood at his office window, looking down at the plaza below. He saw Harding walking with a new group of trainees, stopping them at the entrance. Even from 50 floors up, Thorne could imagine the words being spoken, the story of the quiet consultant being told once more. He saw the recruits looking at the entrance with new eyes, not just as a door, but as a tactical problem to be solved with intelligence and humility. The real victory wasn't that Anya Sharma had proven an arrogant man wrong. The victory was that she had created a system where such arrogance could no longer take root. Her triumph was not loud or boastful. It was silent, systemic, and enduring. True strength, the kind that reshapes the world, does not need to shout. It simply is. It proves its worth through action, earns its respect through competence, and builds its legacy in the quiet, disciplined minds of those who come after. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud ignorance, and where silent discipline defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Tales.